Nearly 2 months have passed since the grim discovery inside that Tesla, and yet, the Celeste case remains a haunting mystery with no clear answers. No suspects named, no cause of death released, no closure for a grieving family. What we have instead is a fog of uncertainty, a web of half-truths, conflicting statements, and digital traces scattered across social media. To understand how a promising young girl ended up lifeless in the trunk of a rising star's car, we must retrace every step that led here. From the first signs of distress in Celeste's online posts to her final known movements, and the crucial hours when the Tesla became a tomb, this is not just a timeline of events. It's a descent into a series of warnings ignored, connections denied, and opportunities to save her that slipped away. Let's go back to the beginning and uncover what was missed in the darkest timeline of all. On September 8, 2025, a grim discovery inside a black Tesla Model 3 shook Los Angeles and sent shockwaves across the global entertainment scene. In the trunk of the car, police found the decomposing body of Celeste Rivas Hernandez, a 15-year-old girl who had been missing for weeks. The vehicle was registered to the chart-topping singer Anthony Burke, better known by his stage name David, the voice behind viral hits like Romantic Homicide and Here With Me. What began as a missing persons alert spiraled into one of the most complex and polarizing cases in recent memory. LAPD's investigation into the cause and circumstances of Celeste's death remains incomplete. No homicide charges have been filed, and officials have refused to disclose whether the death was accidental, self-inflicted, or the result of foul play. The secrecy has only deepened public suspicion. Beyond the tragedy itself, this case has become a cultural flashpoint not only because of the celebrity status of the man linked to the vehicle, but because it exposes a system where fame, influence, and silence can shape the very definition of justice. In the weeks following the discovery, David's actions drew scrutiny. He transferred 2 properties, a Hollywood Hills home and a Miami condo, to his mother, just as investigators began seizing his electronics and interviewing associates. Online communities debated whether this was a strategic legal move or a sign of guilt. At its core, the purpose of this investigation is threefold: to reconstruct the timeline of Celeste's final days, to separate rumor from verifiable fact, and to explore the haunting mystery surrounding her death, a case where every unanswered question feels deliberate and every silence calculated. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was not the kind of girl who vanished quietly. Born in 2010 to Mexican-American parents in Santa Ana, California, she grew up in a home marked by turbulence, frequent relocations, short-term guardianships, and a fragile relationship with both family and school. Since 2022, Celeste had been reported missing no fewer than 4 times, each disappearance followed by her sudden return, often refusing to explain where she'd been. Friends described her as mercurial, deeply emotional, and always looking for someone to understand her. Social media became her refuge and eventually her undoing. By 2023, she had built a small online following on TikTok and Discord, where she expressed admiration for certain artists, especially David. Screenshots later leaked by private investigators show that Celeste's online activity intersected repeatedly with fan servers connected to David's community. It was here, many believe, that she first came into direct contact with the young singer, a connection that blurred the boundaries between fan and confidant, artist and admirer. David, meanwhile, had gone from a Houston teenager making lo-fi music in his bedroom to a multi-platinum artist touring international stages. His songs, poetic, melancholic, and centered around themes of love, loss, and violence, resonated deeply with Gen Z audiences. Yet, the same lyrics that made him relatable began to take on a darker tone in the context of Celeste's death. Words once perceived as metaphorical suddenly read like confessions. "I'm scared I'll die alone inside your car." As fame surged, so did controversy. Allegations of inappropriate online communication with underage fans surfaced, though no formal complaints were filed. His handlers dismissed the rumors as AI-fabricated screenshots. But as investigators began cross-referencing Celeste's digital footprint with David's online activity, the narrative of coincidence became harder to sustain. Together, their names form a tragic equation: a young girl searching for belonging and a star surrounded by adoration and secrecy. Somewhere between those extremes, a fatal connection took root. The Celeste Rivas Hernandez case has become a prism reflecting 3 central controversies. First, the unknown cause of death is a question frozen in bureaucratic silence. The autopsy report remains sealed, and LAPD refuses to confirm whether the condition of the body suggested homicide, overdose, or exposure. The lack of transparency has fueled speculation, leaving the public to fill in the blanks. Second, the role of David not as an accused, but as a figure suspended between sympathy and suspicion. His absence from public view since mid-September and his legal team's insistence on cooperating fully only deepened the perception of distance. Did he knowingly harbor a runaway? Was he a victim of circumstance or the architect of concealment? Finally, The property transfer documents verified through Los Angeles County records show that on September 10, 2 days after Celeste's body was found, ownership of David's Hollywood Hills property shifted to his mother's name. Whether this was financial precaution or foresight remains debated, but the optics are undeniable. A man linked to a corpse in his car moving assets amid a criminal inquiry. These questions extend beyond one artist. They speak to a larger dilemma in modern culture: how far celebrity immunity stretches when the lines between fame and responsibility blur beyond recognition. Nearly 2 months have now passed since that night, and still, the fog hasn't lifted. The public is left with fragments, leaked messages, autopsy rumors, and satellite images of a car that became a coffin. To understand what truly happened to Celeste Rivas Hernandez, we must return to where it began: not the Tesla, not the crime scene, but the fragile world that existed before her name became a headline. Let's trace the path backward, piece by piece, through the events, decisions, and missed signals that led to the most chilling question of all. When did the tragedy really begin? Major event. By early 2022, long before her name would appear in crime reports or trending hashtags, Celeste Rivas Hernandez was already the life defined by instability. Police logs from the Santa Ana area record 11 separate calls to her residence between 2022 and mid-2025, a disturbing pattern of domestic conflict, runaway reports, and welfare checks that reveal a home in constant turmoil. The earliest call, in February 2022, described juvenile refusing to return home. Officers found Celeste several blocks away, sitting on a curb near an elementary school playground. She was calm but withdrawn, refusing to speak to her mother and clutching a phone that officers later noted was password locked and filled with social apps. It was the first of many encounters that would paint a picture of a teenager oscillating between rebellion and desperation. Throughout that year, the pattern deepened. In May, neighbors reported shouting and glass breaking inside the family apartment. Police records mention a verbal domestic between mother and daughter escalating over school attendance. By August, Celeste had missed nearly a month of classes. A later welfare call described her as emotionally distressed, possibly self-harming. Although social services intervened briefly, no long-term supervision followed. These reports show a home fractured not by a single event but by a prolonged erosion of trust. Her parents, recent immigrants working long hours, struggled to manage her erratic behavior and online fixation with music communities. Celeste's social identity migrated almost entirely into the digital world, where she could control her narrative and filter her pain into carefully crafted posts. Friends from Discord later recalled that she felt safer online than in her own room. By late 2022, she began using music as both escape and confession. She shared playlists filled with songs about isolation and death, romantic homicide among them, and wrote in captions that lyrics speak louder than adults ever do. The song's melancholic tone and its viral reach would become the first bridge between her chaotic private life and the artist whose car would one day hold her body. That connection, still distant and impersonal at this stage, began as fascination. To Celeste, David wasn't just a celebrity, he was a voice that articulated the very loneliness she could never explain to police officers or therapists. Each unresolved domestic report, each night she ran away, edged her closer to the digital spaces where that voice lived, and where the seeds of their eventual encounter were quietly taking root. While Celeste's world in 2022 was defined by instability and silence at home, David Anthony Burke, known to the internet as David, was just beginning to find his voice. His music career, born from a teenage bedroom in Houston, emerged out of isolation during the pandemic years. He started recording with a broken microphone, uploading rough, haunting tracks to SoundCloud and YouTube. Songs layered with echoing vocals and minimalist beats. What made them distinct wasn't technical polish but emotional rawness, the way they sounded like private confessions left on public display. His breakout came with Romantic Homicide, released on July 20, 2022. The song's tone was subdued yet charged with emotional violence. Its structure was simple, like soft verses, a pause, then a line that stunned listeners. "I'm scared. I'll die alone inside my room." Fans described it as the sound of heartbreak turned into a ghost. Within weeks, the song went viral across TikTok, amassing millions of views in videos that paired the track's sorrow with images of lost love, despair, or self-destruction. But the real storm began after the music video dropped on September 7, 2022, just one day before the date that would later mark the discovery of Celeste's body 3 years later. In hindsight, that symmetry has become one of the case's most chilling coincidences. The video's visuals: a dimly lit suburban street, a young girl in a white dress standing motionless under a flickering light, and a male figure watching her from the shadows, sparked intense speculation once Celeste's name entered headlines. Commenters resurfaced the footage, insisting the girl resembled Celeste and pointing to the video's recurring motifs of death, control, and disappearance. Whether coincidence or premonition, the imagery fed into an online narrative that would only intensify after Celeste's death. Some viewers interpreted the video as an artistic representation of obsession and guilt, while others saw it as a confession disguised as art. The haunting parallels, the age of the actress, the choice of wardrobe, the final shot of an empty room, began circulating across social media at the time of its release. Few could have predicted that a track written by a then 17-year-old would later serve as the forensic centerpiece of a real-life investigation. Yet, as Celeste's online engagement with David's music deepened, romantic homicide transformed from a viral song into a symbolic bridge, the emotional thread that tied her inner turmoil to his artistic ascent. It wasn't just a song she admired, it was, as friends would later describe, the language she used to understand him. By December 2023, whispers began spreading through online fan communities that David was working on a new, unreleased track titled Celeste. The rumor first appeared in a now-deleted Reddit thread claiming that the artist had mentioned a song for someone special during a private Discord chat with early supporters. Within days, screenshots, many of dubious authenticity, circulated across Twitter and TikTok. They appeared to show a line from an alleged lyric sheet. She said forever felt like 15. For most listeners, it was just another cryptic phrase typical of David's writing. But for those aware of a girl named Celeste who often appeared in his comment sections, the lyrics hit differently. Speculation quickly took on a life of its own. Amateur sleuths began combing through live performances, slowed down demos, and leaked snippets, claiming to detect her name whispered in the background of certain tracks. Fan accounts uploaded side-by-side comparisons between earlier drafts of David's songs and messages rumored to have been sent to Celeste. Some even argued that the project had been intentionally shelved after a falling out between the two. While none of this was ever confirmed by David's label, the rumor was never officially denied either, a silence that allowed the narrative to metastasize. The impact on his public image was immediate. What had once been seen as emotional authenticity began to look predatory. Comment sections videos filled with demands for clarification. Journalists started referring to the Celeste controversy as shorthand for a growing unease about the blurred boundaries between fandom and exploitation. For a young artist still riding the momentum of viral success, the timing could not have been worse. The mystery of Celeste, both the song and the girl, became inseparable from his identity, a shadow he could no longer sing his way out of. By early 2024, David had become more than a musician, he was a cultural cipher. His songs, steeped in loneliness and romantic fatalism, resonated with an audience that saw in him both a poet and a mirror. Teenagers flooded his comment sections with confessions about love, depression, and disillusionment. To many, he was not just an artist but a confessional figure, someone who articulated emotions they couldn't express aloud. That intimacy became the cornerstone of his success, and the breeding ground for his downfall. The music scene around David thrived on proximity. He wasn't a distant celebrity, he was accessible. His fan servers, livestreams, and Discord chats created a direct pipeline between his private thoughts and the minds of millions. That transparency blurred the boundaries between authenticity and exhibitionism. As rumors of Celeste spread, the same infrastructure that had elevated him turned hostile. Every lyric, livestream pause, and deleted tweet became a clue in what fans began calling the Celeste timeline. Social media platforms became echo chambers of obsession. TikTok edits juxtaposed clips of David performing with photos of Celeste, constructing narratives that felt investigative but were largely speculative. Twitter threads mapped supposed correlations between his concert dates and her online disappearances. Even legitimate journalists struggled to distinguish credible evidence from viral fiction. In a culture addicted to immediacy, the algorithm rewarded controversy more than truth. By mid-2024, David's image had split into two realities to his loyal followers. He was a misunderstood prodigy haunted by rumor. To skeptics, he was a manipulator hiding behind metaphors and management. The music that once built empathy now amplified suspicion. The same digital architecture that made him famous had begun to dismantle him, piece by piece, post by post. By the time online rumors about David's Celeste song reached their peak, the real Celeste had vanished. On April 5, 2024, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department issued an official missing person report for Celeste Rivas Hernandez, age 13, last seen near Lake Elsinore, California. The report described her as wearing a gray hoodie and carrying a pink Hello Kitty backpack, the same one she had been photographed with in several of her TikTok clips just weeks earlier. Unlike her earlier disappearances, this one carried a different tone. Her previous absences had lasted days, sometimes a week, but she always returned voluntarily, often found at a friend's home or wandering near bus stations in Los Angeles. This time, she left behind her phone charger, clothes, and even her sketchbook, small details that investigators later interpreted as signs of either impulsive flight or planned relocation. The pattern of runaway behavior documented by Santa Ana authorities between 2022 and 2023 gave context but not comfort. Each prior incident had been explained away as a family dispute, an act of rebellion, or a cry for independence. But now, with mounting rumors about her supposed connection to a public figure, the case began to acquire a different gravity. Detectives quietly questioned whether her disappearance was truly voluntary. Online, the convergence was instantaneous. Posts under funders merged with fan theories linking her to David's unreleased tracks. Anonymous accounts claimed sightings near recording studios and concert venues. Each unverified rumor blurred the boundary between search and spectacle. For the first time, Celeste was no longer just a troubled teen in police records, she had become a digital phantom, caught between real danger and the internet's appetite for narrative. And somewhere in that noise, her trail began to fade. The first tangible link between Celeste's disappearance and David's world surfaced months later, not through police reports, but through fragments of live streams and digital chatter. On November 1, 2024, viewers tuning into a late-night Instagram live hosted by David, a brief, unsettling glimpse, a young girl, partially obscured, appearing for only a few seconds at the edge of the frame. Her voice, soft, hesitant, could be heard asking, "Should I say hi?" Before the camera shifted abruptly, and the stream ended. Within minutes, the replay was deleted from the artist's account. But the internet had already noticed. Screenshots and clipped recordings began circulating on TikTok and Reddit within hours, with users slowing down frames and comparing facial features to missing person flyers. The resemblance to Celeste Rivas Hernandez was undeniable. The footage might have been dismissed as coincidence, if not for another sighting. On June 27, 2024, months before the livestream, multiple concert goers at David's Los Angeles show uploaded backstage photos showing a girl resembling Celeste among the crew. In one image, she appeared to be wearing a staff badge. Witnesses later told independent journalists that she was introduced as a fan working with management. L8D later confirmed that concert security logs listed an unnamed, minor guest. But the file was sealed under privacy protocols. The presence of a missing 13-year-old behind the scenes of a high-profile performance became the first real fracture in David's public facade. Then came August 16, 2024, the date that transformed speculation into outright accusation. On the official David Discord server, archived messages from moderators referenced the missing girl, Celeste. After users began flooding chats with questions about her, a moderator's comment, "We don't talk about that anymore," was screenshotted and reposted across Twitter, fueling outrage and conspiracy theories. Though the server was later locked and wiped, those few words ignited a wildfire of suspicion. By late summer, the question was no longer whether Celeste knew David, it was how deeply she had been entangled in his orbit. The sightings, the silence, and the erased footage combined to form a chilling mosaic, a missing girl continually reappearing in the background of a star's, increasingly guarded world, and a digital audience that seemed to notice before anyone in law enforcement did. Just as online speculation began hardening into the assumption that Celeste was dead, a fragment of surveillance footage shattered that certainty. In September 2024, nearly 6 months after her official disappearance, a video doorbell recording surfaced from a quiet residential street in the Hollywood Hills. The clip, timestamped September 14 at 2:37 a.m., showed a slender teenage girl walking beside a man whose silhouette bore a striking resemblance to David, same build, same trademark beanie. The girl paused briefly at the gate, glancing toward the camera with a mixture of fatigue and apprehension. When investigators later enhanced the image, the outline of her jaw and a faint scar under her left eye matched details from Celeste's missing person profile. But what captured the internet's attention was not her face, it was the mark on her wrist. As the girl reached up to adjust her sleeve, a small cursive tattoo reading, "She," flashed under the porch light. Fans immediately connected it to an identical tattoo glimpsed on David's forearm during a rehearsal livestream earlier that summer. Within hours, side-by-side comparisons flooded Reddit threads and TikTok feeds. The narrative that had long been dismissed as rumor, that Celeste and David were living together, suddenly seemed plausible. Neighbors later told reporters they had occasionally seen a young Latina girl entering and leaving the artist's property at irregular hours, usually accompanied by an older man who kept his hood up. One described her as nervous but not afraid, another as out of place, like she didn't belong there. These accounts, combined with the footage, formed what investigators privately called proof of life, confirmation that Celeste was alive at least 5 months after she was declared missing. Yet instead of ending the speculation, the video deepened it. Online commentators debated whether she was staying with David voluntarily or under pressure. Some framed it as a forbidden relationship, others as possible coercion disguised as care. Forensic analysts noted inconsistencies in the lighting and timing, but LAPD's digital forensics unit verified the footage's authenticity. Still, the department declined to confirm the girl's identity publicly, citing ongoing investigation. By late September, whispers of cohabitation circulated through fan communities. Food delivery receipts allegedly linked to the same address listed orders for 2 people. Drone photographs captured a woman's silhouette standing on the upper balcony of David's home. Meanwhile, the artist remained publicly silent, no statements, no interviews, no tour appearances. The proof of life video became the last confirmed sighting of Celeste Rivas Hernandez before everything unraveled. What should have been relief, evidence she was alive, instead became the darkest confirmation imaginable she had re-entered the world, only to vanish once more. This time from behind closed doors. After the September 2024 video doorbell footage, Celeste Rivas Hernandez's trail went abruptly cold. For nearly 4 months, no confirmed sightings surfaced, no school attendance records, no verified online activity, no appearances on neighborhood cameras. Then, in January 2025, one final fragment emerged. A delivery driver's dash cam captured a girl matching Celeste's description crossing Franklin Avenue near Outpost Drive, less than a mile from David's residence. She appeared pale, thin, and disoriented, carrying what looked like a small overnight bag. Investigators later marked this as her last confirmed sighting alive. From that point, the geography of the case narrowed to a single object, a black Tesla Model 3, registered to David's name but reportedly driven by several individuals in his entourage. According to parking violation logs obtained from the city of Los Angeles, the vehicle was first photographed on March 8, 2025, parked along a secluded incline near Woodrow Wilson Drive in the Hollywood Hills. A second time-stamped image from the early hours of March 9 showed the same car in identical position, suggesting it had not moved. For the next 3 weeks, the Tesla remained in plain view. Between August 26 and September 3, local parking enforcement officers issued multiple tickets for expired registration. Neighbors later confirmed that no odor, fluid leakage, or visible damage was noted at that time. The car blended into the landscape, just another expensive vehicle left idle in a city accustomed to transients. By September 5, with outstanding citations unresolved, the Tesla was towed to an impound lot in East Hollywood. The towing contractor later testified that there was no smell, and that the car was moved, with windows intact and doors sealed. The assumption was routine neglect. No one suspected the vehicle contained a body. This period, from January to early September 2025, would later become the most scrutinized stretch of the entire investigation. Each unremarkable day between those dates now reads like an indictment of oversight: a girl missing, a car publicly visible, and a city too accustomed to ignoring the static between disappearance and discovery. On the morning of September 8, 2025, a routine inspection at the East Hollywood vehicle impound facility turned into the breaking point of the entire case. A yard employee, responding to reports of a strong, unusual odor coming from a black Tesla Model 3, unlocked the vehicle to document interior damage. When he lifted the front trunk, the frunk compartment, he recoiled instantly. Inside was a large black plastic bag, duct-taped along the edges, leaking faint traces of fluid. A single human hand, pale and mummified by heat, protruded through a tear in the wrapping. Within hours, LAPD homicide detectives secured the scene. Forensic teams in full protective gear extracted the contents of the frunk, a decomposed female body wrapped in multiple layers of nylon sheeting and thermal blankets. The car's digital key confirmed ownership under David Anthony Burke David, though registration data showed no recent movement or service logs since early March. Identification came swiftly. Latin fingerprints lifted from the victim's left thumb matched those from Celeste Rivas Hernandez's 2022 juvenile file. DNA from hair follicles later confirmed the match with 99.98% certainty. Investigators noted advanced decomposition consistent with exposure to intermittent heat, but no visible blunt force trauma. The state of containment suggested an effort to delay detection rather than destroy evidence. The discovery detonated across the media within hours of the coroner's confirmation. What had been months of rumor and speculation instantly solidified into tragedy. A missing girl, last glimpsed alive near a musician's home, had been found inside his car, the one seen parked for weeks in plain sight. The narrative shifted overnight, from disappearance to death, from gossip to evidence. The investigation had finally found its body, but not yet its truth. The discovery of Celeste Rivas Hernandez's body inside David's Tesla on September 8, 2025, detonated across the public sphere like an aftershock. Within 9 days, the investigation had moved from rumor to active criminal inquiry. On September 17, LAPD detectives executed a search warrant at David's residence in the Hollywood Hills, a modern 2-story property perched above Mulholland Drive. The operation began at dawn. Witnesses described a convoy of unmarked SUVs arriving before sunrise, followed by technicians in hazmat suits carrying evidence containers and luminol kits. Inside, Investigators focused on three key areas: the garage, the upstairs master suite, and a recording room recently converted into a soundproof booth. Sources close to the forensic team later reported finding traces of human biological material, faint blood residues under a rug near the studio doorway, and several items of women's clothing inconsistent with the artist's size. Multiple digital devices, phones, hard drives, and cameras were seized. Detectives also removed several handwritten lyric sheets and journals marked private, each sealed in evidence bags. The warrant's timing was critical. Property records revealed that, only 1 week earlier, David had initiated a transfer of ownership for the house, placing the deed in his mother's name. The document was filed electronically with the Los Angeles County Registrar's Office on September 10, just 2 days after the Tesla was discovered. Investigators interpreted this as a potential attempt to shield assets ahead of legal proceedings. A day later, on September 18, chaos struck hundreds of miles away. A swatting incident occurred at the Burke family's Texas residence, a hoax emergency call that drew armed response teams to their home in North Houston. Local outlets initially described the event as an online prank, but sources later confirmed that the timing coincided with the singer's immediate relocation from California to Texas. The incident forced him into seclusion, and neighbors reported seeing a young man escorted out under police supervision, though no arrests were made. Within days, the moves continued. On September 22, property logs traced the family's second relocation, from central Houston to a gated subdivision in Cypress, a quieter suburban area northwest of the city. Trucks were seen unloading studio equipment, boxed personal effects, and several sealed cases labeled archive. The speed of transition, paired with the earlier asset transfers, intensified speculation that the Burkes were preparing for litigation or flight. Legal analysts noted that such movements, while not inherently incriminating, often indicate anticipatory defense behavior, the consolidation of privacy before potential charges. Meanwhile, the media cycle surrounding the case reached a fever pitch. From September 23 to October 12, news outlets across continents dissected every development. People magazine, E! News, and Rolling Stone each released features reconstructing the known timeline, juxtaposed against the singer's silence. A viral investigative segment from NewsNation aired footage of the Hollywood Hills raid, showing evidence boxes labeled Frunk Case. The images circulated globally, transforming the case from a niche internet obsession into a full-fledged cultural scandal. On social media, fan communities fractured. Hashtags like Justice for Celeste and Cancel David trended simultaneously as defenders clashed with accusers. Some invoked artistic freedom, arguing that his lyrics were being misinterpreted through hindsight. Others viewed his silence as moral guilt. Despite the noise, David's management issued only a single statement: Burke is cooperating fully with law enforcement and maintains no involvement in this tragedy. The brevity of the message only deepened suspicion. Amid the chaos, Celeste's family prepared quietly for her burial. On October 6, 2025, a private funeral was held at Queen of Heaven Cemetery in Rowland Heights, California. Attendance was limited to relatives and a few classmates. There were no cameras, no press, no official remarks from law enforcement. Her mother, escorted by clergy, requested that attendees refrain from speaking to the media. As the coffin was lowered into the ground, reporters stationed beyond the gates captured the silence as its own form of testimony, a moment of dignity in a case that had turned grief into spectacle. By October 12, official updates from LAPD had slowed to a standstill. The evidence seized from the home remained in forensic processing. The autopsy results were still unreleased. But to the public, the story had already crystallized: a missing girl found in a musician's car, a celebrity retreating behind legal walls, and a mother burying her child while the world argued over who was to blame. Elements of mystery and controversy. In the days following the Hollywood Hills search and Celeste's funeral, the internet erupted into a storm of allegations, claims that, if true, pointed to a long-term, concealed relationship between David and Celeste that began when she was barely a teenager. What had once been fragmented speculation now solidified into timelines, screenshots, and obsessive digital reconstructions. Archived Discord logs began circulating across Reddit threads, allegedly dating back to late 2022 and early 2023, when Celeste would have been 12 or 13. The messages, whose authenticity has never been formally confirmed, contained language that appeared intimate, coded references to private rehearsals, late-night calls, and one recurring phrase that users interpreted as a veiled signature: "You know the song's about you." Others pointed to livestream footage from 2024, in which Celeste's voice was faintly heard off-camera, echoing details later corroborated in missing person records. Each fragment added weight to the growing theory that their connection was both personal and sustained. Adding to the firestorm was the now infamous "Shah" tattoo, the identical inscription seen on both Celeste's wrist and David's forearm. Internet investigators treated it as symbolic proof of complicity, dissecting photos frame by frame to establish chronology. Threads under hashtag Celeste Connection and David evidence accumulated millions of views, transforming rumor into collective conviction. The impact on David's reputation was immediate and irreversible. Streaming platforms reported spikes in both listens and boycotts. Fans organized digital protests, petitioning for his removal from upcoming festivals. Sponsors quietly withdrew. The silence from his management, once a shield, became an indictment. For a generation of followers who had once seen David as the embodiment of vulnerability, the narrative inverted overnight. He was no longer the wounded artist, he had become the alleged predator. As the investigation deepened, public scrutiny turned to David's lyrics, words once admired for vulnerability now dissected as potential confessions. The most frequently cited were from his viral breakthrough, Romantic Homicide, and the rumored unreleased track, Celeste. Together, they formed a lyrical blueprint that listeners began reinterpreting through the lens of criminal evidence. In Romantic Homicide, the line, "I'm scared I'll die alone inside my room," had once resonated as the anthem of lonely adolescence. After Celeste's body was found in a sealed car trunk, the lyric took on a chilling duality, isolation no longer metaphorical, but literal. Fans revisited other phrases. "I killed her love inside my head," and "You were the one I wanted dead," reframing them as veiled admissions rather than artistic exaggerations. Comment threads across Reddit, Genius, and YouTube filled with forensic-style analysis. Some compared the track's structure, the pause between verses, the shift from despair to calm, to the emotional dissociation typical of offenders revisiting their crime through art. Then came the whispers around the unreleased song, Celeste. Allegedly recorded between late 2023 and early 2024, snippets of lyrics online. "She said 15 feels forever. I said silence makes it better." Whether authentic or fabricated, the line ignited cultural debate. Was it an echo of a real relationship or an imagined narrative blurred by obsession? Musicologists and legal analysts found themselves at odds. Some argued that lyrics, as self-expressive works, could only reflect inner emotion, not criminal intent. Others countered that in cases involving real individuals, art and evidence can occupy the same space, especially when contextual details, ages, and emotional tone align too closely with factual events. For investigators, this distinction became crucial. Detectives reportedly cataloged David's published and unreleased material as potential psychological evidence, analyzing recurring motifs, secrecy, silence, burial, and redemption. Meanwhile, his defenders cited First Amendment protections, warning against criminalizing creativity. The debate exposed a broader tension. In an era where every lyric can be screenshot, slowed, and reinterpreted, when does confession end and performance begin? For David, that question ceased to be theoretical. His art had escaped the studio and entered the courtroom of public opinion, where metaphor was now being weighed like evidence, syllable by syllable. By mid-September 2025, the artistic debate over David's lyrics had shifted into something far less abstract: logistical movement and legal maneuvering. Following the September 17 search of his Hollywood Hills residence and the September 18 swatting incident in Texas, David quietly began relocation to Houston, a transition that unfolded between September 18 and 22. Officially, representatives framed the move as a return to family roots and a temporary withdrawal from the public eye. Privately, investigators noted the timing, just days after evidence seizures and property ownership transfers, and listed the relocation under potential concealment or asset management activity. Records from moving service invoices and transport permits later confirmed that multiple vehicles, sound recording units, and digital storage drives were shipped overnight from Los Angeles to Houston under the name of Burke Enterprises LLC, a shell entity established only weeks earlier. Within 48 hours of arrival, 2 additional transfers were logged. The Hollywood Hills property deed finalized under his mother's name and a Cypress area house purchased outright, reportedly in cash. Legally, none of these actions violated state or federal law. Financial experts emphasized that retitling assets during a pending investigation can fall within the bounds of standard estate protection, particularly for public figures anticipating litigation. Yet to observers, the optics were damning. Commentators described the move as geographically strategic, placing the artist in a jurisdiction with more lenient privacy protections while insulating key properties from immediate seizure. For detectives, the relocation signaled not flight but fortification, the tightening of a perimeter around privilege. What had begun as a creative empire now resembled a defensive infrastructure, homes converted into legal shelters, family members into trustees, and art into potential evidence locked behind security gates. Behind the outwardly procedural tone of David's relocation and asset transfers, investigators and legal analysts began probing. Analysts lingered underneath every move. Why now, and why so quickly? On paper, the transactions appeared lawful, the retitling of properties, the movement of assets, and the creation of a limited liability entity were all actions consistent with risk management. Yet, when examined against the timing of Celeste's discovery, those same gestures took on an unmistakable defensive logic. One prevailing theory within law enforcement circles suggested that the artist's actions were preemptive shields against financial exposure. If civil litigation were to arise, whether from Celeste's family, a wrongful death suit, or potential negligence claims, placing real estate and revenue streams under familial control could complicate future asset seizure. Such maneuvers, while not inherently illegal, are characteristic of defendants anticipating civil liability parallel to criminal inquiry. In other words, the infrastructure was being rearranged not in response to charges, but in anticipation of them. A second, more controversial hypothesis focused on conscious concealment. Some investigators posited that the transfer timing, 1 week after the Tesla's discovery, could signify an effort to distance both ownership and access from potential body concealment charges. By limiting his direct association with the vehicle's storage location, David may have sought to obscure the chain of possession, erecting legal ambiguity around who controlled what and when. In either interpretation, the motive reads less like panic than strategic containment, an attempt to stabilize reputation and resources before the public fallout hardened into prosecution. The decisions were swift, precise, and deliberate, not the actions of a fugitive, but of someone who understood that in high-profile investigations, the first thing to disappear isn't evidence, it's control. As of mid-October 25, the official status of the Celeste Rivas Hernandez investigation remains unresolved. No charges have been filed against David or any associated party. The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office has confirmed that full toxicology and pathology results are expected by the end of November 2025, citing complex chemical traces that require extended analysis. Leaks from sources close to the forensic lab indicate that preliminary screenings detected residual levels of benzodiazepines and opioids. Though the concentration and sequence of ingestion remain undetermined, the absence of conclusive autopsy data has paralyzed both the investigation and public opinion. Law enforcement officials continue to treat the case as open but inactive, meaning no active warrants are being pursued while laboratory testing proceeds. Behind the scenes, investigators are reportedly compiling a chronological evidence index cross-referencing digital communications, delivery receipts, and property access logs to reconstruct Celeste's final 72 hours. In the meantime, David remains under informal observation, residing in the Cypress property acquired in September. His social media accounts have been inactive since early summer, though his legal representatives have quietly filed trademark renewals and copyright claims, suggesting preparations for eventual rebranding. To the public, his silence feels strategic. To investigators, it reads as self-preservation. The case, suspended between science and speculation, now depends on chemistry, whether the compounds in Celeste's body point to accidental overdose, assisted ingestion, or deliberate administration. Until those numbers are published, the truth remains frozen, a tragedy without a defined crime. If final autopsy results confirm overdose without external trauma, the legal repercussions for David could narrow dramatically. In such a scenario, prosecutors would face significant barriers in proving intent or coercion, relegating potential charges to negligence, improper disposal of a body, or obstruction of investigation, all serious but far from the gravity of homicide. Defense attorneys would argue that panic, not malice, drove his actions, discovering Celeste deceased, concealing the body out of fear, and fleeing public scrutiny. This outcome would also redefine the investigation's moral narrative. What began as a suspected crime of predation might shift into the domain of reckless negligence, a failure to intervene, not an act of violence. However, the optics remain damning. Even if no direct causation is proven, the evidence of proximity, silence, and concealment could sustain civil suits long after criminal exposure fades. Celeste's family could still pursue wrongful death litigation, alleging that David's environment enabled substance access, or that his management failed in their duty of care. For law enforcement, an overdose conclusion would close one chapter but open another, a cautionary case study in how fame distorts accountability. It would demonstrate that the absence of murder does not erase complicity, and that celebrity-driven investigations often end not with conviction but with fatigue, a slow dissolution of outrage into apathy. If that is where this story ends, it will not be with a verdict, but with a vacuum, a 15-year-old girl gone, a superstar protected by process, and a justice system forced once again to measure tragedy in technicalities rather than truth. On September 18, 2025, just 24 hours after LAPD executed its search warrant at the Hollywood Hills property, the investigation suffered a dangerous and deliberate disruption. A false emergency call was placed to Houston police, claiming that a wanted homicide suspect was barricaded inside a residential home belonging to the Burke family. Within minutes, tactical Nitsasquik personnel surrounded the property, deploying flashlights and drones while news helicopters hovered overhead. What began as a routine hoax, a practice known online as swatting, instantly compromised the integrity of an active cross-state investigation. The call, later traced to a disposable VoIP number routed through Canada, triggered chaos. Officers forcibly cleared the home, handcuffing two relatives before realizing the call was fraudulent. Inside, detectives attempting to coordinate with LAPD were ordered to evacuate as the property became a live tactical zone. For nearly 4 hours, communication between California and Texas law enforcement was suspended. During that window, several local media outlets erroneously reported an arrest in progress, sending David's name trending again before Bleehan confirmed the event was fake. The consequences were immediate. Evidence coordination halted, chain of custody transfers were delayed, and the case's credibility momentarily fractured under the glare of misinformation. Investigators privately suspected the swatting orchestrated by an online faction, possibly intending to discredit the probe or create sympathy for the artist as a victim of harassment. Whatever the motive, the hoax demonstrated how easily digital interference could derail real-world justice, a collision between spectacle and mercy that turned tragedy into theater once more. In the aftermath of the swatting, misinformation metastasized. Across social platforms, anonymous accounts began spreading grotesque falsehoods about the condition of Celeste's body. Claims that she had been dismembered, that her remains were partially burned, or that she had been found pregnant at the time of death. None of these assertions held a trace of truth, but the imagery was powerful enough to dominate algorithmic feeds for days. Forensic documents reviewed by media partners, such as Hindustan Times and NewsNation, later confirmed that Celeste's body was intact, preserved within multiple layers of plastic and fabric, showing no evidence of dismemberment or mutilation. Medical sources also stated unequivocally that there were no indications of pregnancy, a fact corroborated by internal AD pathology summaries. Yet the retractions arrived too late. By the time verified information surfaced, millions had already consumed and repeated the false narratives. The viral rumor cycle illustrated a disturbing shift. Crime reporting no longer required journalism, only imagination amplified by outrage. Sensationalist accounts exploited grief for engagement, while legitimate investigators were forced to spend resources debunking fiction rather than pursuing facts. For Celeste's family, these distortions compounded the trauma, her memory recast through the internet's appetite for shock. In this new ecosystem, truth travels last. The grotesque became more clickable than the accurate, and silence from official sources intended to preserve evidence integrity was misread of validation. The dismemberment myth and pregnancy rumor will likely persist in online archives for years, long after forensic clarity fades from the headlines. In the war between verified detail and viral distortion, the body of evidence remains intact, but public belief irreversibly fractured. Community and media response. When Celeste Rivas Hernandez was finally laid to rest on October 6, 2025, the ripples of loss reached far beyond her family. In Lake Elsinore, the small Southern California town where she had spent much of her early adolescence, grief was quiet but pervasive. Outside her former middle school, students built impromptu memorial photographs, folded notes, and wilted carnations taped to a chain-link fence that overlooked the playground where Celeste once spent lunch periods alone. Teachers who remembered her described a girl, bright but distant. Someone who oscillated between curiosity and melancholy. On the night of the funeral, candles lined the sidewalks of Lakeshore Drive as residents gathered for a silent vigil. There were no speeches, only music. Classmates played recordings of Celeste's favorite songs, including Here With Me, a track that had once comforted her and now carried unbearable irony. For many, the event marked the first communal acknowledgement of what had long been unspoken, that beneath the gossip, the autopsy rumors, and the celebrity noise, a child from their own neighborhood had slipped through every safeguard meant to protect her. In the months following the funeral, Lake Elsinore became a mirror for systemic neglect. Local social workers revisited old case files, discovering that Celeste's name appeared repeatedly in juvenile welfare reports, instances of truancy, suspected, and chronic runaway episodes that never escalated to sustained intervention. Residents began asking difficult questions. Why a girl so frequently on record as vulnerable had not been placed in consistent protective custody, and how digital warning signs, public cries for help on TikTok, Discord messages hinting at fear could have been ignored until it was too late. Community forums and town council meetings turned her story into a rallying point for reform. Parents spoke about the erosion of communication between schools, social agencies, and families. Teenagers spoke about how easily their online interactions blur with danger. Even months later, murals and ribbons remained along the lake's edge, not as decoration, but as warning. For Lake Elsinore, Celeste's death was not just a tragedy of circumstance, but a reckoning with complicity, proof that sometimes a community doesn't lose a child all at once, it loses her slowly, over years of silence. While Lake Elsinore mourned in candlelight, the internet raged in pixels. On social media platforms, grief mutated into conjecture, and conjecture into accusation. Social media became the de facto courtroom for the Celeste case. Each platform hosting its own version of events, often detached from verified evidence. Threads dissected David's facial expressions in interviews, parsed his lyrics for hidden admissions, and analyzed his property transfers as symbols of guilt. The first viral wave centered on the timeline of their alleged relationship. Users reposted old screenshots, supposedly from Discord chats, pairing them with selective excerpts from his live streams. "You were too young to understand." Became a quote circulated thousands of times, stripped of context. TikTok creators reconstructed imaginary dialogues, crafting dramatized reenactments that blurred fiction and fact. What began as collective curiosity evolved into a digital witch hunt, fueled by algorithms rewarding outrage over accuracy. A second surge followed news of David's property transfers and relocation to Houston. Amateur, financial sleuths published speculative spreadsheets suggesting hidden accounts, while fan accounts juxtaposed photos of his house with clips from Romantic Homicide, implying symbolic premeditation. Even mundane legals became weaponized as proof of intent. Each upload, each tweet acted like sediment, layering conjecture until it resembled evidence. The irony was stark. While real investigators struggled with forensic silence, social media users built a parallel investigation, complete with theories, villains, and conclusions, all unfolding before the autopsy results even existed. The line between participation and persecution dissolved. For millions online, Celeste's death was no longer a mystery to solve, it was a narrative to inhabit. As the online discourse spiraled, the tone shifted from fascination to fury. Public figures began weighing in, some with sympathy, others with startling insensitivity. The most controversial moment arrived when rapper Meek Mill, during a livestream on October 9, 2025, made a flippant remark implying that every artist's got a skeleton in their Tesla. The comment, meant as humor, detonated instantly. Within minutes, hashtags like "Hey Meek Mill apologize" and "I respect Celeste" dominated trending lists. Influencers, survivors, advocates condemned the statement as cruel and dehumanizing, accusing him of turning a child's death into entertainment. The backlash became a pivotal moment in reframing the digital tone of the case. Prominent creators released videos urging audiences to stop spreading unverified claims, emphasizing that mockery and misinformation only deepen the family's trauma. For once, the collective outrage redirected inward, toward the culture of viral speculation itself. Clips of Celeste laughing, singing, and posting before her disappearance resurfaced, humanizing the name that had been buried beneath rumor. By late October, a subtle but significant shift occurred across platforms. Users began adding disclaimers. "This is just theory, awaiting confirmation," a small gesture toward restraint in a space built on immediacy. Still, damage lingered. The very networks that had amplified awareness had also distorted it beyond recognition. What was once a platform for justice had become a feedback loop of harm, oscillating between empathy and exploitation. In the wake of that realization, the loudest voices grew quieter, leaving behind a digital landscape littered with half-truths, fragments of a story the internet could not let go, and a grief it was never equipped to hold responsibly. By late October 2025, as social media hysteria began to plateau, the mainstream press reasserted control of the narrative, attempting to separate verifiable detail from rumor. Outlets including TMZ, ABC7, VB Magazine, and Hindustan Times released synchronized updates reconstructing the official timeline of events based on law enforcement briefings and verified records. TMZ published the first comprehensive chronology, charting Celeste's final year, from her April 2024 disappearance, to the September 24 doorbell footage in the Hollywood Hills, and finally to the September 8, 2025, discovery of her body. The report underscored that no criminal charges had been filed, and that the autopsy results remained pending, countering weeks of internet speculation. ABC7 Los Angeles followed with a broadcast segment emphasizing LAPD's caution, quoting an unnamed investigator who stated, "We are still determining whether this was a crime, a cover-up, or a tragedy that spiraled out of control." VB took a cultural approach, examining the collision between celebrity worship and moral accountability, framing the Celeste case as the first major digital-era morality trial conducted by fans. Meanwhile, Hindustan Times focused on forensics, publishing an exclusive summary from the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office, confirming that the body was not dismembered, contradicting online rumors. Their coverage also detailed the meticulous evidence cataloging inside the Tesla, temperature readings, containments, and decomposition rates, presented not as shock value, but as procedural fact. Together, these reports represented a collective course correction. They reframed the case from myth to method, establishing a factual scaffold around which speculation could finally be measured. Yet, Amid that effort, new intrigue emerged, not from tabloids, but from law enforcement insiders hinting that the story was far from complete. Among the analysts interpreting these developments, Detective Steve Fisher, a retired private investigator known for consulting on cold cases, became a central voice. In an interview with NewsNation, Fisher cautioned that the public's fixation on David might be oversimplifying a multi-layered situation. He noted inconsistencies in eyewitness accounts and hinted at a twist involving Celeste's circle of friends, suggesting that third-party involvement could have shaped her final movements before death. Fisher emphasized digital forensics as the next battleground, the extraction of deleted messages, GPS data, and call logs that could reveal whether Celeste was acting alone, under influence, or under pressure. His statement, "Sometimes, the real story isn't in who hid the body, but in who watched it happen," went viral, reigniting debate just as public interest began to fade. His analysis reframed the case once more, not a binary of guilt or innocence, but a mosaic of silence shared across multiple hands. It left audiences unsettled, the sense that, even with timelines clarified and rumors dispelled, the full truth of Celeste Rivas Hernandez's final days might still lie buried in someone else's phone. Current status and forecast. Following the late October media corrections and Detective Fisher's televised remarks, the Los Angeles Department's Homicide Division shifted focus from public speculation to digital reconstruction. The working theory, according to internal summaries leaked to select outlets, is that the key to Celeste Rivas Hernandez's final hours lies not in physical evidence but in data, the invisible trail left by her phone, messages, and device synchronization. Throughout November, LAPD's Digital Forensics and Cyber Unit began piecing together the last 48 to 72 hours of Celeste's life. This included subpoenaed metadata from Google, Apple, and Discord cross-matched with Wi-Fi logs from David's Hollywood Hills property. Investigators mapped location pings showing Celeste's phone was active within the residence until approximately 1:42 a.m. on September 5, less than 3 days before the Tesla was towed. A secondary signal, possibly from a backup device, appeared briefly in the vicinity of Sunset Boulevard, suggesting a failed attempt to discard or reset the phone before it went dark permanently. Parallel to this, detectives examined Uber and DoorDash records, which showed 2 late-night orders placed from David's address under an alias linked to one of his production assistants. Both orders listed 2 meals, a detail considered minor, but consistent with the theory that Celeste remained alive inside the home until early September. LAPD also cross-referenced ring camera captures from neighboring houses, reconstructing a partial movement timeline, a Tesla door open, interior lights flashing, and a figure loading what appeared to be a duffel bag into the front trunk, the same compartment where her body would later be found. Despite the mounting circumstantial framework, authorities have repeatedly stated that David remains cooperative. His legal team has granted limited access to communications, provided time-stamped tour itineraries, and surrendered security footage archives from the recording studio. To date, no arrests have been made, and no official suspects have been named. For investigators, the case has entered a delicate phase, one suspended between transparency and caution. Each recovered byte brings clarity, but also complexity. The picture forming on their screens is neither confession nor exoneration, just the fragmented truth of a final weekend that refuses to align into one clean narrative. As November 2025 draws to a close, the investigation now hinges on a single document: the final autopsy report from the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner Coroner's Office. After nearly 2 months of chemical testing, tissue sampling, and DNA cross-verification, the long-awaited results are expected to be released before the end of November. According to preliminary leaks from internal pathology sources, the report is likely to conclude that Celeste Rivas Hernandez died of acute drug intoxication, most consistent with a mixed substance overdose. Toxicologists have reportedly detected a combination of benzodiazepines, oxycodone, and ethanol, with concentrations suggesting ingestion rather than injection. Trace evidence of crushed tablet residue found in her points toward oral consumption within a few hours of death. While the presence of sedatives and opioids raises immediate red flags, investigators have so far found no evidence of forced administration, no injection marks, defensive wounds, or restraint abrasions typically associated with coercion. If confirmed, these findings would fundamentally reshape the legal framework of the case. An overdose, intentional or accidental, would shift prosecutorial focus from homicide to post-mortem concealment and obstruction. The absence of blunt force trauma or asphyxiation would make proving intent to kill nearly impossible, though moral culpability would remain a public question. The coroner's office has emphasized that its report will stop short of assigning motive or responsibility. Its purpose, they clarified, is purely physiological, to describe how Celeste died, not why. Yet that distinction offers little comfort to those still seeking justice. For the family, and for an audience that has spent months interpreting silence. The autopsy's sterile conclusions may be both a revelation and avoid the end of speculation, but not the end of doubt. Even as investigators await the final toxicology report, murmurs within law enforcement circles suggest the case is not finished. According to private consultant detective Steve Fisher, who has tracked the digital forensics since September, the anticipated twist may center not on the singer himself but on a small circle of friends and associates who allegedly helped conceal Celeste's body after her death. Forensic analysis of Wi-Fi logs and shared devices reportedly places several of David's close collaborators at his Hollywood Hills residence during the critical 48-hour window preceding the Tesla's towing. One assistant's phone registered data transfers to a hard drive later seized from the property, while another's fingerprints were detected on the plastic sheeting used to wrap the body. Though none of these findings yet meet the threshold for charges, they indicate post-event participation, a possible group effort to manage a crisis that had spiraled out of control. Fisher's remarks to NewsNation on October 29 encapsulated the unease. "I don't think this was planned murder or deliberate neglect. It looks more like a chain of bad decisions shared among friends trying to protect someone." If verified, such a revelation would expand the narrative beyond celebrity scandal into a collective moral failure, an inner circle complicit not through violence, but through silence. In this prediction, the case's resolution will not hinge on one confession, but on how many people knew and chose to do nothing. The professional fallout has already begun. In early October, Interscope Records quietly removed David's upcoming U.S. tour dates from promotional listings, citing logistical conflicts. By mid-month, insiders confirmed the tour's full cancellation, voiding dozens of venues from Los Angeles to New York. Endorsement contracts were suspended, collaboration shelved, and a planned short film soundtrack withdrawn from streaming platforms. Public opinion, once divided, has largely turned. Despite maintaining cooperation with investigators, David's silence and property transfers are now interpreted as signals of guilt rather than prudence. The Hollywood Hills deed reassignment, initially described as asset management, has become shorthand in entertainment media for avoidance and privilege. Within industry circles, his name evokes uneasy, a reminder that in the digital age, reputation collapses faster than evidence solidifies. Whether or not he faces legal repercussions, David's career stands as a cautionary monument to the fragility of fame, proof that the same audience that built him into a star can dismantle him overnight. One rumor, one screenshot, one truth. Conclude. The Celeste Rivas Hernandez case now stands as one of the most haunting mysteries of 2025, a story that unfolded in fragments across states, screens, and headlines. The timeline is stark in its sequence yet murky in its meaning. Celeste first disappeared from Lake Elsinore in April 2024, resurfaced months later on a video doorbell in Hollywood Hills, and vanished again by January 2025, her last confirmed sighting near Franklin Avenue. By September 8, 2025, her decomposed body was discovered inside the frunk of David's Tesla, a car that had sat unnoticed for weeks on a quiet Los Angeles street. The discovery triggered a chain reaction: raids on David's Hollywood Hills residence, property transfers, relocations to Texas, and a swirl of social media fury that blurred fact and fiction. Despite extensive searches, subpoenas, and digital reconstructions, investigators have yet to declare a criminal motive. The pending autopsy, expected to confirm an overdose, may determine whether the case closes as a tragedy or reopens as a crime. Still, crucial questions remain unresolved. What happened in the final 72 hours before Celeste's death? Who assisted in moving her body? And what role, if any, did David truly play: protector, participant, or bystander? The investigation's silence, though necessary for due process, has become its own narrative, one that mirrors the void Celeste left behind. What began as the disappearance of a 15-year-old girl has become a lens into the anatomy of power, fame, and digital hysteria. A story where every timestamp, every transfer, and every unanswered question reflects a society struggling to tell the truth from noise. In the midst of speculation, one truth endures: a child is dead, and justice has not yet spoken. For Celeste's family, every rumor and every delay reopens the wound that never had time to heal. They have asked not for vengeance, but for clarity, for the truth to stand on its own without distortion. The call for justice now extends beyond the courtroom. It asks the public to resist the seduction of rumor, to hold both law enforcement and media accountable, and to remember that sensationalism is not advocacy. Each false claim, about pregnancy mutilation, or hidden confessions, has already stolen pieces of Celeste's dignity. The path forward must reclaim it. True justice for Celeste lies not only in identifying who concealed her body, but also in acknowledging how society concealed her suffering long before she died. It means demanding transparency from investigators, ethical restraint from journalists, and empathy from audiences who once consumed her story like entertainment. If this case has taught anything, it is that the pursuit of truth requires patience and compassion, not hashtags. Until the final report is released and accountability is named, the only correct position is the simplest one: to believe in justice more than in noise. The case's resonance reaches far beyond one artist and one victim. It exposes a generational crisis, the intersection of celebrity culture, online obsession, and systemic neglect. David's downfall demonstrates how swiftly fame can erode under the weight of moral ambiguity, while Celeste's life reveals the vulnerabilities of youth shaped by the digital gaze. This tragedy compels uncomfortable reflection. It forces the entertainment industry to confront the blurred boundaries between artist and admirer, how intimacy is commodified, how parasocial connection disguises exploitation, and how mental health crises unfold in real time before an audience that mistakes visibility for safety. It also challenges social media users to reconsider their role in the machinery of rumor. Every repost, every thread, every update that feeds an algorithm at the expense of truth. In the end, Celeste's story is not only about loss, but about responsibility, the responsibility of platforms to moderate, of fans to discern, and of the powerful to protect rather than consume. The lesson is clear yet haunting: when empathy becomes entertainment, justice becomes impossible. What remains is a legacy written in fragments, a reminder that beneath every viral case lies a human life, and that the loudest voices online rarely echo the quiet truth buried underneath.